right into this video lesson. We're going to be learning more in depth all the tools of Adobe Illustrator that I think you'll need for your next assignment, which I'm about to explain as well in this video. I'm explaining to this in a video so that when I put this online tonight, you may look at it and think of what you'd like to do for next lesson going forward, and also study the tools. You may not have Photoshop at home, so I thought following along with a visual example would help. And I wanted you to have this too, just so that you can hear me explaining it the way I think of it, so that it is more clear how I think of this work when you are being graded next week on it. So I'm going to tell you right now what your assignment is next week. I'm going to start this lesson with that. It is a logo. So you guys will need to come up with a logo for yourselves, essentially, or sort of a fake company or charity or whatever you'd like that you are going to be making work about for a while now. And next week you will have a full work period, as well as this week, to specifically build that logo. But this week's assignment will be for no marks. You'll be creating rough drafts by following the design principles I taught you in the previous lesson. And again, I have made a video of that for you guys to watch at any point. That's a great reference to those design principles. But today's assignment will be to create 4 logos or 4 versions of your rough design of your logo for next week, which you'll have a full period to work on and get perfect. That is something that represents a brand or your own self that you are inventing, or again, describing yourself. So again, a brand is something that is representative of an idea or a group or a person or a company, and it represents them visually in the most simple form and becomes sort of a symbol that people recognize as that entity or person. For example, the Nike swoop is a great example. When you see the Nike swoop, you think Nike shoes. So what I want you guys to do is start thinking of something that represents you, or again, a fake company that you are going to be acting as. And you'll be using the design principles from last week to make them 4 rough versions in Illustrator today. So I'm going to jump into making a new Illustrator file. I have one open here, but I'm just going to restart it. Next week, you'll get to explain your choices. You'll be marked on your choices, your actual work, your understanding of what I've taught you based on your work, and your ability to also talk about all of this clearly, either in written form or vocally to me. So, okay, I kind of muddled that up. Let's jump right in. So I'm going to make a file called My Tutorial, and this is going to be one artboard. So this is one sheet of paper. The name of the file is My Tutorial. The sheet of paper is going to be 8.5 inches by 11 inches, and this is a normal standard piece of paper in real life. And so here you go. It's going to come up right there, and look at that. Perfect. So I'm zooming right now by hitting Control minus and Control plus. Control plus right now, Control minus right now. Zooming in and out is your first step to understanding this program. So I'm going to just draw some things here that I'm going to use in examples going forward. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to give you this PDF to read and be able to understand. But for some of you, I think watching me use the tools will make more sense than simply reading these explanations. So again, I'm only going to expect you guys to sort of understand some of these tools, because every person learns and uses these design software in sort of their own way, based on their own strengths and weaknesses. So okay, we're going to jump right into it now. The selection tools. Okay, so selection tool, the basic one, just the one called the selection tool, is just this arrow in the top left corner. It helps you pick up, move, shrink and grow shapes, or rather anything you have on your artboard, your piece of paper, by selecting anchor points, which are these little white squares along the edge of these rectangles that I have drawn here. So you select one object at a time for this, and it works great. See? It's way better than Photoshop, where you have to go through a lot and actually use the transform function to transform things. Here you just select them and you're able to change their shape, their size, and sort of where they situate on the page. The direct selection tool is next, and it's directly next to it on the toolbar. It is the white arrow, and it allows you to pick the individual anchor points and change the shape bit by taking those anchor points and moving them around, so that you're now drawing something altogether quite different from what you started with. So again, this is more like pulling and sculpting a shape into a new one from what you started with. And so here I started with a square, and I made it into like an arrow shape, and here it's just more of a trapezoid. Okay, so again, you just pull these anchor points, and it pulls one at a time. And you'll notice here, Adobe Illustrator naturally stacks everything in layers, just like Photoshop. And here they are. You can actually move them on top of each other, just like Photoshop, so that, you know, maybe you want that triangle type shape to be in the back. There we go. I'm going to put it there for now. It doesn't really matter. I'll bring it back up to the top. See? And now it's on top. Great. So I'm just going to hide the layers, because for the most part you don't really need to think of them for these tools. Anyways, that's great. So the group selection tool is for when you have objects stuck together in a group. And to make a group, you'd actually use the normal selection tool, select what you want to group, and then hit Command or Control G. And then, wow, they move all together like one big lump. And then this can be, you know, great, but sometimes you'd want to edit one part of a group at a time. So the group selection tool lets you pick an object within a group and move it around without ungrouping it. Oh, move the whole window. Whoa, don't want that either. Anyways, there we go. So yeah, I can move the whole group with the normal selection tool, or I can go to the group selection tool and actually move parts of the group at a time. So that's great, very handy. The magic wand selection tool picks, you know, these were all squares to begin with, so you pick one square and it selects everything that is and was a square at any point. Or again, you know, maybe you start with a triangle, it does anything like that. Wow, my girlfriend is apologizing for waking me up in the middle of the night last night by being loud, and you know, I apologize for that showing up in this lesson. Kind of embarrassing. Anyways, moving on. Magic wand tool. The next tool you're going to need is the lasso. It helps you pick anchors at a time, much like the direct selection tool, except you use sort of this, like, you know, drawing tool to select what you want. So just this anchor has been selected. You'd actually have to go back to the direct selection tool to do anything to it anyways. So, you know, there's not a lot of use in this unless, you know, you're maybe trying to delete a point or something similar to that. I don't use this tool very much myself. I'm expecting more that you're just going to really be using the normal selection tool and the direct selection tool. But I thought I should tell you about the other ones just in case. So in Adobe Illustrator, there's another selection tool that's important, and I think you will use. It's the Artboard tool. And this actually selects your whole piece of paper with everything on it and moves it around. Because sometimes you'd maybe have two, and you're going to make changes on one of them and then save them out differently so that you have two slightly different files. So that's important. You're going to want to use this Artboard tool in the future to also delete whole pages at a time, or resize them, because maybe you only actually want to focus on a part of your drawing, and then that's what you're going to save out. So you're given a lot of, what do you call it, control over that in this program, which is really great. So, you know, I'm actually going to just go ahead and delete this other artboard. Great. And now I have these lines floating in space. I'm going to delete them too. So okay, let's move on to the drawing tools. The most basic one you're going to use is the pen. Now, you click a point and it creates an anchor, and you move the mouse and it draws a line between that point and the last one. So this is like a line drawing tool, but it connects all the lines together, and in the end you get a shape if you connect all your points together. And all of those anchors can again then be edited using the direct selection tool. So again, you have a lot of control over how that looks after you draw it. So again, you're not limited to what you make at first. There's a curved version now too. Some versions of the Illustrator have this, some don't. So what you do is you'd click a second spot, and then you have you move the mouse and you have control over sort of where a curve goes. And it makes curvy shapes instead. You know, you can achieve the same results by using the pen tool and then just editing sort of, this anyways. See, I could still make curves if I really wanted to, but this way you're just drawing the shape as curvy right to start. So that's what this version of the tool does. It's not listed here directly, but it's a version of the pen tool. So what's important too is the add anchor point tool. You'll have to click and hold the tool buttons to sometimes get the different versions of them. So the add anchor point tool takes any line you've drawn and adds anchors to them where you click. So now you have even more points where you can go and directly, change the shape from scratch. There you go. Great. Very weird, maybe sideways Pac-Man type thing going on right now. Great. So sick, lumpy Pac-Man. And again, you can actually take away points by also holding down and going to the delete anchor point tool. But you have to figure out where the anchor points are first, and then it actually simplifies the shape based on that too. So you lose detail when you do this. So I personally don't like using that tool as much as the add anchor point tool, because again, you can still just choose not to edit them after you add them. I'm not going to get into all of these. Okay, so the line segment drawing tool. This one draws straight lines, but they aren't always connected to each other. So if you hold shift as you use this tool, the lines turn out straight, either diagonally or up, down, left, or right. So kind of messy. Unlike the pen tool, which again I'll use, connects all the points you draw and turns them into a shape. Once you connect all the points together, the line tool just draws lines. And again, there is a curved form that you can get by holding down the button. It draws curved lines. And what's kind of confusing is it only curves the line sort of in a certain direction based on where you start clicking. And it can be kind of tricky to use. But again, you can actually conjoin the parts and lines together by clicking the endpoints. The spiral drawing tool is another version of this line drawing tool, but it's pretty useless. I rarely use it. You need to be needing to do some really specific swirls or something to want it. And again, it'll try and snap the line to the last one you did. But again, kind of, why do you need that? The rectangular grid tool creates a rectangular grid. And you actually have control over each of the lines on it. So it's great. You might want to do something that is based on sort of a grid of squares and then use the direct selection tool to change all the lines. Now, these lines aren't actually connected to each other. They're a whole bunch of individual lines, unfortunately. So it's just a square, really, with lines drawn on it, but in the form of a drawing tool. You don't get to make a whole bunch of complicated edits the direct selection. So, again, the grid's there, but it's not a super useful tool for beginners. So what's more important, I think, is the shape drawing tool. So the rectangle is the most simple form. And so when you draw anything, even a line, you have a fill, which you can go up here and the fill is this sort of square block. Right now the red line crossed through, it means there's no fill. I'm going to give it a green one. And the stroke is the square with sort of a hole in it. The hole means that there's a fill elsewhere, and that's that block. and you can actually change the outline color with that, and you can change how thick the outline of a shape is or a line is, again, by pressing the stroke button and bringing up and down that number. So I'm going to usually you'd use 1, and you'd use no fill and sort of a black stroke on the outside. Most basic shape. Okay, so the rectangle tool gives you a rectangle, and then you can edit it with the selection tool. There's a curved one for rounded rectangles. There is also a ellipse tool, which is just kind of another word for oval. Again, if you hold shift while you do any of these tools, you'll either get a perfect square, perfect round square, or a perfect circle. So that's useful to know. There's no triangle drawing tool, but there is a star tool. So what you do is you double click there and you'd press 3 points on the star, and it actually comes out a triangle, which is handy. It took me quite a while to learn that, just through trial and error. The other tools like the lens flare, I don't think you'll need to know, and the polygon is, again, it's a polygon, but again, you're given a certain number of anchors that you can edit, and if you actually round that off, you would get a circle, a perfect circle, but with a whole bunch of anchors already on it to change the shape. And so now I have like maybe a Pac-Man with a nose here. Kind of weird. Great. Pac-Man with a nose. Anyways, so I'm just going to show you another tool, the brush tool. It's for sort of, replicating paintbrushes. You can change the type of, line it draws so that you get something almost like, the real brush stroke here. Hard to see, but as you zoom in, it actually looks more like, wow, like a paint stroke. This is for styling stuff. It's not really practical for beginners to use. You just draw things freehand. But then again, there's lots of anchors around these that you can edit and change after you draw your lines so that they change after the fact. And then there is the pencil tool, which is kind of, hidden in this version of Photoshop. It can rewrite. In older versions of Photoshop, this tool doesn't let you just draw over things. Every time you sort of start from a point, it'll redraw a line. So be careful with the pencil and brush tools in older versions of Photoshop, which may run better on certain computers, because these drawing tools are actually kind of finicky and sometimes erase lines if you draw over top of them. So what's handy is you can actually draw lines away from each other in those versions and then bring them together with the selection tool, which is a great way to do that. I'm not sure if you're going to need any of these other things right off the bat. The type tool is important to know. It's how you start by writing letters. You then select the text and you can change its size. Can't really see it here, but we'll go here, back to the text tool, and I need to give it a folder, I think, for it to show up. Yes, here you go. You get the actual text size. And so, if you want to turn these into shapes with anchor points, well, you can click on the text, hit object, and expand, and then, okay, and you will get objects now with actual anchor points, tons of little anchor points. So it's very easy to then take a letter and then change it so it's like a drawing or stylized. It's a great way to start a logo is maybe to start with text or something and then edit the anchor points. But for now, I think that's all you should really need. Mind you, there are different types of the text tool, and I'll show you what the pictures look like on this. I'm not going to show you them in the program because you won't need them yet. The basic text tool just draws within a square that you pick. This version of the text tool, called the type area tool, draws within a shape that you click and then you start writing inside of it. The draw along a path tool lets you draw along a path along the outside of it. The vertical type tool lets you write up and down. Some languages are written up and down instead of left to right. And then the type vertical area does the same as this one, but on the inside of a shape, you write vertically, and then type along a path vertically is the same as type along a path, except instead of on the outside, you type where the path goes. And so for now, that's all you're going to need to know. But what you're going to do is you're going to make 4 different versions of your logo, a rough version. So it doesn't matter if it's very beginner. I just want you to be thinking of the design principles and doing something to show that you understand them with the logo. Like maybe doing something like creating a version that has a lot of repetition. So maybe like this is maybe a brand of running shoes I'm working on. Oh, this is very weird. It's not showing up properly. Let me restart the drawing. The shape tool. There we go. And maybe I'm going to make something. I'm going to rip off the Nike logo for now. Quite kind of, not that complicated to do. Bumpy Nike swish. So I could have done this a lot better, but I want to be somewhat creative and just show you editing. Nah, whatever. This is actually very bad. Start the square. There we go. More like the Nike swish. So maybe you want to do something where your swish, or this is just an example, has a version with no fill, and you're copying it, Control-C, Control-V to paste, and repeating it a lot to make it look like it's moving. Again, you can actually also use the Select tool and hit Alt, and then click to make a copy of something. So here I've used repetition. Kind of looks bad. I'll bring down the stroke weight. Yeah, you get this kind of weird path of them. Maybe you could do something like make a pattern out of your logo. So maybe I'll do the letter A. And I'll take that letter A. I'll expand it so it's actually an object I can edit. And then, again, I'll copy it with Alt and click and move. And I'll rotate it. Oops. Copy it again. And I think you see where I'm going with this. I'm just making sort of this weird shape or pattern out of it. And you maybe copy that. And look at that. Now I've kind of got a pattern to work with. There you go. And then once you make it, you can just keep copying and pasting something so that you have something more and more complicated as you go along. There you go. Not perfect, but kind of an example pattern. There you go. So I want to see 4 examples of a rough logo, and then you'll make a really nice one next week. You can put a lot of thought into it. You can use the drawing tools to maybe make something. I'm giving you a lot of freedom. I want you to learn the program more than anything, but I also want you to learn to think about the design principles while you do your work from now on. And anyways, guys, that's great. I'll see you next week. I hope you understand and enjoyed this video. Ask me any questions you need for the rest of the class as you work using the program.